And welcome to In This Corner with Cyrus Fees. We have a very, very special episode for you. I mean, one of the biggest icons that the sport has ever had, right? So one of the biggest legends. I'm excited about it. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of these credentials, and I think you'll know who it is very quickly. He is a 9-year veteran of mixed martial arts, a UFC Hall of Famer, winner of the UFC 1, 2, and 4 tournament, longest fight in UFC, most tournament wins, most tournaments. I mean, he holds a lot of records. I'm talking about the one and only, the legend, Royce Gracie. Royce, how are you doing, my friend? It is great to have you on In This Corner.
Life is good in my world. No complaints.
That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. And you are traveling right now, and I think you're always traveling, from what I could tell. You're currently in Maryland, and you keep one of the busiest schedules, I think, that I've ever seen. Yeah, I think you and Dan Severn have to be the hardest working men in MMA history. You guys never stop going.
I enjoy teaching, and I like travel, so I put both of them together.
And how long have you been doing that? So you've been keeping this crazy schedule for how many years now, as far as training, doing seminars? I know you work with police departments and you work with all these different organizations. How long have you been doing that now?
For about since 2098,
Okay.
somewhere on there, I start traveling, and 2000 increased more, and every year increasing more and more.
Yeah. And what are some of the examples? I know I've heard, and I know Dan has told me that he works with some police departments, and I've heard the same thing about you as well, working with hand-to-hand combat. And of course, you know, the elements of jujitsu that can be so useful in hand-to-hand combat as well. Give me some examples of some of the organizations that you are working with. Okay.
I travel about 7 months of the year all over the world. I'm not a huge guy. I'm an average man, 180, 182. So it's people simulate themselves more with me. And
yeah,
if I can subdue somebody without hurting them, that's what they're looking for. That's what people are looking for, some kind of self-defense. And law enforcement is looking for be able to subdue somebody without having to hurt them. That's the idea.
Well, yeah. And, you know, that really speaks to what has happened in the last, 2 or 3 years, where there's been a lot of, situations with law enforcement where a lot of people believe that they have used their guns maybe quicker than they need to, and that perhaps they could use some more hand-to-hand combat and more, I look at it all the time. I see videos, where it'll result in somebody being shot, but then I think, this guy maybe has a knife or whatever. Why are they not using some hand-to-hand combat? Why are they not using jujitsu? You'll see a guy get away from a police officer or even 2 police officers, and you think to yourself, with some basic jujitsu, this would not be a problem. I mean, are you seeing the same thing?
That's correct. But that's what I do. That's what I teach them. I try to travel, go to the departments and work with them. And but the whole thing is they're so busy with their normal schedule. Sometimes it gets to the end of the day, they're like, man, I don't want to do anything. They're keeping them, the departments are keeping them so busy. But they have to save a couple hours, an hour to 2 hours to go practice, to train.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, I think in a situation like that, in a job like that with law enforcement, that is so crucial to always be training and to always be ready. So I'm glad that you're out there. I'm glad that guys like Dan's out there, and so many people are out there trying to teach these basic elements of jujitsu, because it could be so useful. Well, let's talk about, a little bit of history here with Royce Gracie. And you grew up, of course, your father, Helio Gracie, and what he meant for jiu-jitsu is so very important. And obviously your brothers as well. What was it like growing up in the Gracie household? I think everybody assumes that everybody's fighting all the time, that there would just be these crazy brawls and these crazy arguments. What was it like growing up with all these brothers, all these incredible martial artists?
Good people to protect me. Let's just say that way. Something happens, I'll call my older cousin, my older brother. But no, we're not. we're not training or fighting every day and learning every day. We're living life.
Yeah.
So we keep the competition among ourselves, pushing ourselves, you see. So my brothers, my cousins, we're always pushing each other, not just on the mat training, but with everything that we do.
Well, let me ask you this. So, obviously with your father being Helio and the history in jiu-jitsu, was there ever another option for you? I mean, because you obviously went down that path and you became, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu fighters, one of the greatest mixed martial artists. And was there ever another path for you that maybe you thought about doing, or was it always, okay, this is going to be my life. I'm going to be a martial artist. I'm going to be teaching martial arts. Like, did you know that early on that was what it was going to be?
In my family, my father never pushed us to do jiu-jitsu or push us to fight. By the way, we didn't learn how to fight. We learned how to teach.
Yeah.
In my family, my father is very specific on teaching us how to teach. Fighting is just to prove their style is the best. Now, I never push my kids to do it, to train, to teach, to fight. What I tell them, like my father told us, is learn. As long as you know what you're doing, you see, you're good. You don't have to teach, or if you want to do something else, go ahead. If you want to be a chef, you want to be a law enforcement, go ahead. But you have to know what you're doing, at least to defend yourself. The teaching, the fighting, that's a choice. It's not like we were forced to do it.
Yeah, no, and I like to hear that. I think that's very interesting, because so many of you under your family went on to do incredible things in the sport and in jiu-jitsu, and it's one would assume that that's what you had to do, but it's good to hear that your father was so open about that and said, yeah, if you want to do something else, go do it, but make sure you're good at what you do, right? And make sure you learn. So I think that's very interesting. And I think the legend of your father is so incredible. But maybe in today's day and time, you don't hear about it as much. Tell us a little bit more about your dad, because I think he is one of those faces and one of those people that I think more people should learn about. And just give us, some more words about your dad.
Most people that the people that met him, the most common comment they would make, it was, wow, after they trained my father, see my father moving around, teaching a class, they'll go, man, this old man is so strong. He's so fast. But he was not. He couldn't do a push-up. A 2-year-old can outrun him when he was in his 90s. But what he did is he had the perfect timing. That made him fast. He had the perfect leverage. That made him stronger. But he wasn't fast or strong. No, he had the perfect timing and the perfect leverage. That's what made him good.
It's one thing about your father that I've read about is, and it's very well documented, the challenges that he had with, these masters of these different martial arts and of these, of these wrestlers and judokas, et cetera. And he liked to have these challenges, and it's well documented, these fights. That's also something that you were doing at one point as well. And it's something that I actually read about recently, where you were laying out open challenges. And I heard that there was even an open challenge to Mike Tyson at one point. What can you tell us about that? Because I think that's pretty amazing. Like, how did that go? Were you just sending a letter out like, hey, I challenge you to a fight, let's do this? Was it that simple? Just kind of walk me through that.
Yes, it was that simple. But the idea, a lot of people in the beginning, going back to my father's time when after he learned jiu-jitsu, and a lot of people thought that the Gracies are arrogant. They're trying to put that challenge in the other styles to put them down. No, it wasn't the idea. The idea was we're on a personal quest to try to find out if our thing work. So the boxer says that did the best puncher in town. They can knock everybody out. And then the karate guy comes over and said the same thing. And then the taekwondo guy was like, no, 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 I can kick everybody, knock everybody out. So there's only one way to find out. Take all the rules out, time limit, weight division. And that's how my family started back in Brazil. And in the beginning, like I said, a lot of people are like, oh my God, they're so arrogant. They're trying to put down the other styles. No, you say you're the best in what you do, combat sport. I say my style is the best. So let's duke it out. Let's see what happens. So we take all the time limit, weight division, no gloves, no rules. And that being said, my brother, Rorion, when he came to America, he started all over again because that was set in Brazil. But then in America, what happens in Brazil, nobody knows. And then when Rorion came to America, it started again. The boxers, the karate guys, the wrestlers, everybody's saying that their style is the best. So that's when he came up with the idea to create the UFC. It wasn't to put down the other styles, but it's to find out, it's a personal quest, to find out if our jiu-jitsu really works against somebody bigger, stronger, that knows what they're doing on their style.
You know, I've seen video, and I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit of some of the Vale Tudo stuff from Brazil, you know, in the late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. Some of the stuff with Vanderlei Silva, I've seen a couple of his fights. And I even talked to Mark Kerr about this because he went down there and was in the Vale Tudo championships. And just, it seemed like the most raw fighting I think that I've ever seen. You know, even as exciting as the UFC was with that production, seeing something like this in the basement of a hotel or in this makeshift ring, it was some of the most raw fighting I think that I had ever seen. What can you say about that was going on in Brazil at that time, that Vale Tudo, and that just, I mean, it was just some grimy fighting. What can you say about that?
That's exactly what I said before. It was the only way to find out which style is the best is to take the rules, gloves, weight division, time limit, take everything off. So yeah. It's a two men walking in to try to their styles. You see?
Yeah.
It wasn't, people say, oh my God, but it's so barbaric. Yes, it is. But it's to find out. It's two men fighting. Of course, they have the judge, the referees, there's the corner man that can stop the fight. You see, the doctor can stop the fight at any time. So it's not like two men fighting to death. No, it's not.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, let me, going back to the challenges, who were some of the other guys that you did send that challenge letter out to, you know, that we would know about, that some of the big names that maybe we would know about that you sent out that challenge letter to? Obviously, we hear about Mike Tyson, and I believe that Mike Tyson was even in prison at the time when you sent him his letter. But who were some of the other guys maybe you challenged at the time?
Mike Tyson was not in prison.
Oh, he was not. Okay. All right. Yeah. That's.
Yeah. By the way, I wasn't fighting for 9 years only.
Yeah.
I fought this 93 until the last fight was about 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking like active, you know, just like, yeah, in the organization. I know. And when I read that, that's funny that you come back to that because 9 years for Royce Gracie seems crazy, but it was just in those, you know, those sanctioned fights that we saw that it seemed like it was.
The first one was 1993 at the UFC. The last was in Bellator about 3 years ago. So that was a little more than 9 years.
Well, yeah, of course. So yeah, I guess I was just talking about the, all right, listen, I stand corrected.
Mike Tyson was not in jail. He was, and he did want to do it. And I saw an interview by him, and he told me that before. Man, I would love to do that, but I'm glad I didn't do it. The managers, the lawyers around him did not let him do it, you see, because that would ruin boxing at the time. But he's actually a very nice guy. He told me, man, I'm glad I didn't do it because he would have taken me down. I wouldn't know what to do. But anyways, my brother at the time was inviting all the fighters, all the top guys. I don't know who he was inviting, but he was calling and sending messages and letters and getting in touch with them, personally calling them up. And hey, we're having the UFC tournament that we're creating. You're the #1 karate guy in town. Would you like to participate? If he refused, my brother will get a hold of the number 2 karate guy. And
Yeah.
number 3, and the same thing with wrestling, with judo, until somebody accept. So
Yeah.
who specifically, I don't remember. I don't know. He was the one in charge of that.
Yeah. And it's such a concept, obviously, with the original UFCs, and everybody now is so very well-rounded. It seems like everybody learns everything, where, you know, at that time, everybody had their discipline and they were fighting in their discipline. And then it was thrown into this big tournament. And it feels like maybe we'll never see it that way again, right? Like, it doesn't seem like we'll ever really see, especially in the UFC, we'll never really see that again. We see wrestling standouts that go in there and they can do very well. Sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't. And that goes for jiu-jitsu, that goes for judo, etc. But it just seems like we'll never see that, you know, that rawness ever again. What do you say about that?
On the beginning was a style against a style.
Yeah.
So it was one style against a style, trying to see which style works, what system works. Now it's not a style against a style anymore. It's a fighter against a fighter, because everybody practices the same thing. Everybody practices stand up, the styles, the kickboxing, karate, taekwondo, or the wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu. They're all practicing both the stand up and the ground grappling. So plus the rules came in play to be able to grow all over the world. They had to adapt to some rules, like putting the gloves, the time limit. They have to make a set of rules to become a show, not a fight anymore, you see. So
well, I mean, how do you personally feel about that? Because
it's good.
You think it's a good transition. Okay.
It had to be done. It had to start that way. If it was pure raw, like you said at the beginning, with no gloves, no time limit, no weight division, we can time that. That's what happened with my fight on UFC 4. It went, when I beat Dan Severn, the cable company cut out the 2 hours because they bought a window, and the fight went, I think, like 2-3 minutes over time, over the time of the window on the pay-per-view. So nobody saw me choking your friend Dan Severn out.
Exactly. You know, and that's, you know, admittedly, you know, when UFC was very, very popular in the beginning, I was young, and I was probably 11, 12, 13 years old when the original UFCs were coming out, and I didn't see them originally, and I didn't know that it had cut out before the pay-per-view was actually over. That's insane. That's something that I guess everybody was in an uproar. A lot of the fans were very, very upset because they didn't get to see the end of that fight. That had to be a crazy thing for everybody running the UFC at the time.
So they had to adapt some rules with the time limit so it can fit in the window of the pay-per-view of the show. So they had to adapt the rules to be legal everywhere, because back then was just on Indian reservations, and states did not have the athletic commission, the boxing commission. So they had to put the gloves on, and the time limit and the rules, and had to come in play. So I understand the rules equal for both of the fighters. It doesn't favor one or more than the other.
Well, you know, something that I like so much about the early UFC, and even the Pride fights and even the K1 fights, is everybody calls it a circus style fight, right? You know, and the David versus Goliath type fights. I mean, you were in the ring with Akebono, which is bananas, right? And some of the guys you were in the cage with in the UFC were just massive guys. And I think that's why you're legend, not just because you won, but because you won against these big guys. And I think that kind of blew everybody's mind. I still like to see those type of fights today. There's a few organizations that still try to make these fights over in Thailand. They do a show called Fight Circus, funny enough. Or, you know, even in Japan, they like to do these fights as well. In Russia, I would assume that you would like fights like that still, because that was a big part of your career, was beating up guys and choking out guys that were so much bigger than you. Do you like these type of fights still? Or do you like, you know, the more weight classes and limits and all the rules, or do you still like to see some of these other fights where it's the smaller guy versus the bigger guy?
It's not exactly the smaller guy against the big guy, but they put in two representatives of different styles to fight.
Yeah,
And sometimes you end up being a smaller guy against a bigger guy. But the problem with that is if you put time limit, it's unfair for the little guy.
true. Yes.
So for you to do such a fight against somebody 180 pounds, against somebody 250, you have to take the time limit. By the time when you take the time limit off, now it becomes a problem with TV show. It can't be a show anymore because you can control how long it's gonna take the fight. You see,
Yeah.
so that
Well,
becomes. But yes, I like that, but I like because it shows the technique of their styles. But it's not bad the way it is right now. I don't regret. I don't condemn the way it is. The time limits, if it's equal for both of them, 5 rounds is a long time. 25 in a cage fight, it's a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see it all the time. A lot of guys going from 3 to 5 rounds. It's doesn't matter how much you train, right? I mean, you get in there and it's still a lot more time inside of the cage. Backstage, in the early UFCs, was it always very respectful with some of your opponents? Obviously, we think about Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn. They automatically come to our mind. Was it always very respectful between you guys at the end of the day? Or was there always a little bit of animosity, that competition part of it, even after the fight? What was your relationship like with some of your opponents afterwards?
I mean, I had no relationship with them whatsoever because they're trying to kill me. But
yeah.
We're always respectful to each other.
Yeah.
So there was no trash talking. If you watch the fights from the past, there's not much trash talking, and even Pride, K1 back in Japan, or Dream Stage, or UFC back then, there was no trash talking. Everybody was they were martial artists. They were not trying to sell the show. Today, I think guys try to sell a little bit too much.
Well, yeah,
I don't mind the trash talking, but being disrespectful is a different story.
Well, I'd be remiss, as we tape this, it was just 2 days ago that we saw Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, and Conor was saying things about Dustin's wife, and there was a lot of stuff going on there. And me personally, I appreciate Conor McGregor for who he is. I think you would probably agree it's good to have these guys in the sport, especially if you're fighting a guy like Conor McGregor. And I had to explain this to my wife. I was like, Dustin Poirier says he'll fight him again. Of course he'll fight him again. I mean, he makes so much more money when he fights a guy like Conor McGregor. And he even said that he makes 5-6 times more money when he fights McGregor than if he fights for a championship. It's amazing. So you have to have a guy like a Floyd Mayweather or a Conor McGregor. But do you feel like Conor specifically has gone too far with what he's saying to his opponents, the way he's acting? Do you feel like it's gone a little too far now?
That's his character. The
Yes.
problem is not that. The problem is people trying to copy him.
Yeah.
You see, that's him. He talks like that. So let him be. But people that try to talk, so he's teaching the next generation how to be disrespectful. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And people, the next generation don't understand. They think it's okay to be disrespectful. But that's Conor McGregor's style. That's him only. You see?
Yeah.
The problem is people try to copy him.
Yeah, Conor, Chael Sonnen, some of these guys, they do it so naturally, right? And then you see other fighters, they try to do it and it's not natural to them, So that's very, very true. And let me ask you something about the old days, a few more things about that. We had recently on my show Oleg Taktarov, and he explained that, he was working with your family and working in the gym with you all for quite a while. And that he felt like the story was that the Gracies didn't want him to be in the UFC, that there was this, basically trying to hold him back from the UFC, telling our Davey, now you don't want this guy, yada, yada, yada. What do you say about that? Because that's kind of what he said on our interview, is that, he was doing a good job being in your camp and being, training with your family. But then when it was time to go into the UFC, nobody wanted him to go into the UFC. What's your response to that?
I never trained with Oleg.
Yeah.
And as far as I remember, he fought my cousin and got knocked out by my cousin, Renzo.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can say.
So no, yeah. So
the UFC at the time, they were choosing guys, the best of their styles.
Yeah.
So why they didn't choose him, I don't know.
Well, I mean, obviously,
choosing, but he never trained in my academy. Never trained with Rorion school or my school.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, but still, the Gracie still had, obviously, and Rorion obviously was, the catalyst for that, for the original launch of the UFC, but still had a lot of influence. Did your family still have a lot of influence in the UFC? UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the early UFCs. Was there still a lot of influence from your family at that point?
Of course, Rorion was the owner.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So why Rorion didn't choose him? That's a question for Rorion, not me. There's
of course.
100 people applying for it. So he gets the best that he thought was the best for the show to represent their styles. And Oleg eventually went to fight and he fought. He's a very good fighter.
Yeah, fantastic.
But they're trying to keep him away from fighting? I don't think so, because he fought my cousin and got knocked out.
Yeah, well, there it
I don't know what to say. What else to say?
No, that's it. No, I think that's the perfect response.
If he make it sound like we're afraid of him, no, because he got knocked out. Sorry.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Was Oleg ever a champion on the UFC?
Tournament champion, yes, he was. Yeah, and I'd have to pull it up really quick, but
I don't remember.
Yeah. Now I got to look it up here real quick, because now we got to figure this out. It was UFC 6, the UFC 6 tournament, and that would have been, who was that? What's that?
How many fights was that? 3 fights?
That was 3 fights. That was Dave Beneteau, Anthony Macias, and Tank Abbott at UFC 6.
One time?
I believe just the one time, yeah. And then he did the ultimate and beat Marco Ruas, Dave Beneteau, and then lost to Dan Severn. And then he moved on.
Hold on. He lost to Dan Severn?
Yes, he lost to Dan Severn.
I beat Dan Severn.
This is true. Yeah.
He won how many times? One time?
He won one time.
So he's gonna talk trash? Come on, man. Like, we're trying to avoid him from fighting. If we avoid, how come he didn't win more times?
Yeah,
how come he didn't beat my cousin when he fought? So I rest my case.
The case is closed. The case is closed. You moved on. What was the catalyst for you to move on and to go to Pride, eventually go to K1, and then step away from the UFC? Kind of what was the reason behind that?
Because they start to put too many rules.
Okay.
And my brother Rorion thought was not made for me, because now they're putting time limit. I'm fighting guys bigger, stronger. So why put somebody smaller to fight somebody? The time limits and the gloves, it kind of move away from his idea. And Japan was still doing that. There was no time limit, no weight division, and unlimited rounds. And see, so that's why we moved to Japan. Well,
speaking of which,
and then back to Bellator. Back to the UFC and then back to Bellator.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Japan, though, the Sakuraba match still is mind-blowing to this day. 90 minutes straight, with Kazushi Sakuraba. Just talk to me about this fight, because I obviously didn't see it live. I've seen video of it. I haven't sat through all 90 minutes of it. but I have seen video of it. Talk to me about this fight.
That's the most boring fight ever. It's two guys fighting for 90 minutes, an hour and a half, man. It was 6 rounds of 15 minutes with 2-minute rest. It was unlimited. It was until he broke, with one of the kicks in the 6th round, he broke it was a partial tear on the tendon, a crack on the shin. That's when I sat down, I told my brother, my father, I can get up, but I can't walk. Tell me what to do. So they're like, okay, you already proved, let's not confuse being tough with stupidity. You already proved that you're tough by walking there. Continue. If you can't walk, it's stupidity. So,
well, had there been...
I had a rematch with him, with Sakuraba.
Yes.
And there was like 3 rounds of 5 minutes. And I won by points, yes, by decision.
When you go back and you talk about obviously stepping away from the UFC because they had so many more rules at that time, had there been the proper weight classes, and I guess you just say it this way, if Royce Gracie, stepped into this style in your prime, in your fighting prime, proper age, this style of weight classes, and where you could fight at 170, 185, how do you feel like, how you would fare in today's UFC now?
There's only one way to find out.
Yes. No, those are the best words.
We cannot imagine Muhammad Ali fighting today with the box. Is very hard to compare the past, or Jim Brown playing football today, you see. But then back then they had no helmets. They had not the equipment that they had today, not the training that they have today. So it's very hard to compare.
Do you feel like the athletes now, where they know everything, where they learn everything, and they become a great jiu-jitsu fighter, and they have the great wrestling background, and they have judo, and they have kickboxing? Do you feel like they're just a better athlete at this point? Do you feel like they go into, let's say John Jones goes back into the UFC tournaments, 1993, that specimen, that skill set, do you feel like he would have an advantage over guys that you were fighting at that time?
Very hard to compare, because again, put the John Jones to fight somebody, the heavyweight champion, Brock Lesnar. You see, there's only one way to find out how they would do, and it's not just one single fight. You have
exactly
same now. So it's very hard to compare. You see, it's a strategy game. It's not just come in and duke it out. Yes, the athletes today are much better. They improve the diets and
the science. Yeah, exactly. There's so much
science, and the equipment, the shoes and the machines, and yes, everything improves so much, makes them better.
Yeah. It's what, everybody has these ideas, these fantasy fights and these fantasy things, but it is very interesting to see this.
How would Conor McGregor would have fight against Brock Lesnar? It's like there's only one way to find out. I'm not gonna say Conor would lose or Brock Lesnar would lose. It's just we gotta figure it out. We gotta find out. But then we cannot put time limit. You see, it becomes a strategy game. And then after they finish, there's a next fight coming over.
I think I don't think you still don't see it very often today. I mean, there's only a few organizations out there to this day that will do, a one-night tournament, a 4-man tournament, or an 8-man tournament. Obviously in the US, we know that commissions will not allow for this. But you don't even see it that often, on Indian reservations, or in these different, countries. You still don't even see that very often today. Why do you think that is? I think it's one of the most exciting things in all of sports to see a one-night tournament.
Because there's no time for the pay-per-view. For
the pay-per-view, yeah. It just kind of goes back to that.
TV. They did not pay-per-view, but even a TV show, they have to buy a window.
Yeah.
They cannot. What if they buy a 3-hour window and all the fights happen very fast, all knockouts in the first minute? Now they finished everything in 1 hour, and they got 2 more hour window.
Yes.
What? Tap dancing.
Yeah,
So
so there's so
very
many
hard
variables to it. You're right. I
to,
mean, because
so
it could
they
go
have
either way. It could go either
plan.
way.
It's a show today. It became a show. So, yep.
Let me ask you, the business aspect, how your family and how you've specifically, we talk about, I always hear about my friends that have been training MMA and my friends that are coaches to this day. They talk about the Gracie VHS tapes and they talk about Gracie's in action and this incredible business model that your family has had and that you've had over the years. What do you attribute that to? Being so business minded and doing everything very intelligently, how you handle your business, et cetera. What do you attribute that to? Was that something that your father instilled into you? Was that something that, just something that came naturally to you? What was that?
That was all Rorion,
Yeah.
my brother. He's the
Okay.
one business mind. He's the one that create all that and had the vision for all that.
But still to this day, though, I mean, it's still something, I mean, you're able to do, these seminars and you're very business minded. Like when I talked to you before we even did this interview, I mean, you're telling me about your schedule, like having 4 days at home for this month or 5 days at home for the next month and this intense schedule. You run everything like a very, very tight business. Is that just a discipline thing for you? Or, how are you able to run everything like you do?
I don't think as a business, I think as a passion. I
Okay.
love to teach. I like to travel. So it's not, I don't look as a business, I look as a passion.
Yeah.
And I am very disciplined.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way for anybody that's in business, right? I mean, or that's in life, just in general, having discipline, being able to stay on a schedule, being able to manage your time, is so crucial. I think you would probably agree with me on that.
Totally agree. That's why I tell everybody. People ask me, "What do I need?" You need discipline, not just for fighting, for jiu-jitsu, but for life in general.
Yeah.
You got discipline.
I feel like a documentary or like a docu-pic with, Hollywood actors is going to happen one day. Not just, for the UFC side of things, but just for the Gracie family in general. Is that something that's been talked about? Because I think at this point it's been, when you talk about the incorporation of the UFC and this sort of thing, 1993, that's been 30 years. It seems like a lot of people would be talking about that now, and that would be going around in Hollywood. Is that something that you've heard about? Is that something that you've entertained, like a documentary or a major motion picture type thing?
Rorion has been talking about that.
Yeah.
He's been working on that. He actually had been talking to people and to do it because his story when he first came to America, he was didn't show up here with a golden spoon. No,
Yeah.
no. He was panhandling on the streets. He was sleeping on the streets and spent a year like this traveling through California and panhandling and living on the streets and went back to Brazil because when he first got here, he stayed, I think, at the YMCA in California
Yeah.
and Hollywood, and the night shift guard stole his ticket back to Brazil and his money. So he's didn't have money, didn't want to call Brazil, call dad for money, so he just sleep on the streets, sleep on the beaches, and stay here for a year until save enough money to go back to Brazil. Went back to Brazil, got a law degree, and then came back again to America. Same thing. Was no starting, came over starting already an academy or
Yeah.
teaching, fighting. No, there was none of that. So that story is very impressive.
Yeah. So if the movie comes out, it's gonna be a Rorion Gracie story, and then you'll be in there on the side winning the UFC tournaments, and you'll have your father back there. But you feel like Rorion's story you feel like that's really the best story to tell. You feel like out of your family and this incredible story.
My story would be a different one.
Yes.
My story would be Rorion was the persistent, the hard work, the discipline, determination to to survive, to create all this. Mine would be more of I would say more of an inspirational one, like everybody assimilate themselves with me. I'm 180 pounds, 178, 100 when I was fighting. Today I'm 180. And it's like average sized person. How can you go on to defeat one time was 4 fights in one night?
Yeah.
Beat 4 opponents, master their styles. They know what they're doing, bigger, stronger. And I walk in there and subdue all of them without hurting them, showing the technique that I learned from my father.
Yeah, and I really want to bring you back for another interview to talk just specifically about UFC too, because I kind of want to go all the way through is what I want to do. Maybe go UFC 1 to maybe UFC 10. And I want to get different guests for each UFC, but I want to bring you back for UFC 2 because that was just such a historic one. I got a few more questions, and these are from some fans that they had a few questions for you. I got 3, 4, I think I got 3. Brian from Tennessee, and I got a lot of people from Tennessee, admittedly, because our audience is still kind of small. We're growing it, but it's a lot of people that are big MMA fans and that are fighters as well. Do you feel like there's anybody today, when you look at some of the current top fighters, that could survive the challenges of the original UFC tournaments? And like we just talked about, fighting 3 or 4 times in one night. When you look out there and you see some of the fighters, who are some of the fighters you think that would do really well in the tournaments?
Everyone have a chance.
Okay.
Just imagine if I was not at the UFC 1, who would have won that? You see, somebody would have to win.
Yeah.
So,
well, you see like a guy like Khabib. I think Khabib, he has retired effectively undefeated. Nobody really seemed to be able to figure him out. Just such a strong fighter, great wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. And then, of course, his striking got better as well. Pretty amazing that nobody was able to get a win over Khabib. I feel like Khabib would do really well
fighting against a guy like Brock Lesnar.
But I mean, if with the time with the time limit situation, right?
Like
I mean,
said, there's only one way to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Against Ken Shamrock at the time, you
yeah.
see, or somebody that's way more and stronger and knows what they're doing, and so there's only one way to find out. I'm not saying that he wouldn't do good, but he's a very good grappler.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I got Eddie in Tennessee, and he says this is more of a specific jiu-jitsu. How does Royce feel about the modern game of guard pulling and inverting compared to the traditional game?
Don't like it.
Okay.
Don't like it. Doesn't work for MMA.
Okay. So that's kind of, you just think it doesn't really work for the sport very well. Obviously the guard pulling, it doesn't tend to work very often. You don't see many fighters pulling the guard very often. So you're just saying you just don't think it works well for the sport.
It's a martial art was made for you to defend yourself in a street fight. So if you get in a fight in the street, martial arts in general, you're going to sit down and pull guard in the street.
Yeah, true.
They got top. There's no point system. There's no, yes, if you're fighting a tournament, great. But if you're in the street, it's very hard to do that.
Okay, I got one that's a little bit more personal here. Lou says, have you ever questioned the way your life was going and where it ended up? So I guess it's kind of a deep personal question. Was that ever an issue for you? You thought, what am I doing or something like that? Or did you ever question the way your life was going?
Never. Like I said in the beginning, when we first started the interview, you asked me how I'm doing. I said, life is good in my world. Why? Because I understand the way things happen. Yeah. So there's no such a thing as a bad news, bad thing. No, I don't look at that. It meant to happen that way. Example, I travel 7 months of the year. Sometimes I get to an airport, and very rare, but sometimes it happens, and they cancel the flight because there was a mechanical problem. The flight is delayed. And people, I never understood why people get so upset at the airport and yell at the counter people. My God, this is outrageous. I can't believe, blah, blah, blah. I chew them apart. I'm thinking, I am glad they found a mechanical problem while we're still on the ground. Imagine in the middle of the air. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, we're 10,000 feet high and we got a mechanical problem. That would be a problem. So I understand how things happen. Instead, get upset and get all bent out of shape. Do you see? But I see people at the airport bent out of shape and, oh my God, I can't believe that you let this happen. Aren't you glad that they found the mechanical problem while we're still on the ground?
Yes. I don't travel as much as you do, but I would agree. Yeah, you can't help but to be upset, especially if you're going home, right? You're excited to go home, you want to see your family, and then you hit the delay. But then if you think about it positively, you're right. You don't want to be up in the air when they find that problem.
But much worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Then you don't get to go home at all. I guess last one is, and this is the typical one that you're going to get a lot. What was, when you look back, what was your favorite fight that you had? I don't know if it was maybe your best performance or just, the biggest fight that you had. And then who would you have loved to fight that you didn't get a chance to fight?
UFC 1, fighting 3 fights in one night. No, stop. UFC 2, fighting 4 fights in one night.
4. Yes.
No, UFC 3, fighting against Kimo, 250 pounds of a beast, man. No, you know what? Even better than that, UFC 4, fighting against the finals against Den Severn. After fighting 2 guys, have to face Den Severn in the finals. Hold on, Sakuraba, hour and a half in the ring with him. No, there's one better than that. Hold on, erase all those. Akibono, 6'8", 490 pounds. My point, all of them.
even the Bellator Ken Shamrock fight. Why not, right?
My last fight, my first knockout.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So there's something great about all of them.
And who I like to fight?
Yeah.
I never chose my opponents. Didn't
Really?
care. Just whoever you put in front of me, I'm going.
Okay. But was there anybody that you saw that you're like, wow, we could have had a good fight? Like when you look back and you see
everybody's a good fight for me.
I love it. Great answers. Always. Well, you know what? This has been really, really good. And like I said, I would love to bring you back to talk about UFC 2. And just so you know, I'm going to be hitting you up to get maybe a few of your cousins and family members to get on the show as well, because we got to do that as well. Because there's obviously some incredible people in your family tree that I would love to have here on In This Corner. But I just want to thank you. Is there anything that you want to put out there as far as, I know you have to keep a very busy schedule, but where people could possibly reach you if they wanted to bring you in for a seminar or wanted to bring you in for a signing, etc. Is there a way to get a hold of you?
RoyceGracie.com. Go to my website. Yep, that's the easiest way.
Okay, there it is. Royce, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being here on In This Corner, and we'll do this again, and we'll talk all about UFC too. It'll be a lot of fun.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
And there it is, folks. That is Royce Gracie right here on In This Corner. Wow, that was incredible. It was so awesome to have Royce here and the stories, and there's so much more that we can get into. So we can't wait to have Royce back. Check us out on all of our social media at In This Corner MMA, or you can find me at Cyrus the Show. I'm Cyrus Fees. We'll see you next time right here on In This Corner.